ICWA, Neck Now Judge Abby, Requoy Hawk. What I said to you was hello. I told you my name and where I'm currently living, which is on Requoy here on the Klamath River. I appreciate very much your invitation to have me speak today on the Indian Child Welfare Act and to talk with you people who are practicing and trying to make this work in our communities. And what I want to really emphasize this morning is how we should be approaching this. Many of you, just right off the bat, are like 90% smarter than I am. You're highly educated at this point, and that's really good. But what you have to really take a look at is who educated you and how they educated you. And what you have to sort of relearn as you come back into community is their system is one based on rights and power. When they talk about sovereignty, they're talking about the power too. When I talk about sovereignty, I'm talking about the responsibility to and the responsibility for. Now that's a completely different value system. And so it's not surprising that those value systems would yield different practice systems. And what you've learned is the practice system of the power people. What you have to create, because nobody's doing it, is the practice system of the responsibility people, that's who we are. If we want to be effective, and if we want to move in our community in a positive way, take what you've learned, use that, but don't let it run you. What you've got to do is figure out how are we going to make this work in our community and what's going to work for our people who have been so hurt by what's happened to us and to our place, to our home place. And you look at this and you go, okay, what does all this mean? People say, well, historical trauma. Well, to me, historical trauma has to be defined by area. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is, yes, historical trauma is important, just like ACEs are important. You have to know what's going on. But ACEs are symptoms, okay? They're not context. And they're a way to help blame the victims, frankly. Because it's like, okay, Abby, this is what you're doing wrong. You know, I have a real revelation for you. I already know, for the most part, what I'm doing wrong. You know, and the people that you're dealing with, they actually know it too. You know, they get it. They get that they're in trouble. All right? This is not a revelation to them. What they need help learning is where that behavior came from. And for each region, for each tribe, it's going to be different. And if you don't know that, then you don't really have a sense of how you're going to help them move forward. You take our lands here. What did we live through? We lived through an invasion that was horrific. People came here, they murdered, they stole, they abused everybody they could get their hands on, and then created a system that they said was better than everything that we had ever had. Okay, that's one issue. We can kind of push that aside. So that's one historical trauma. Then you look at, what's the second one? California basically was admitted to the Union through a lie. They were a slave state. And who were the slaves? We were the slaves. And it was allowed by law. So they were a slave state. We were the indentured slaves. And for the most part, the people who were indentured were children because it's easier to control children. They haven't seen some of my kids, but what the heck. But for them, that's in their mind. That's what they did. And as I said to a room full of social workers one day, I said, you know, we're all Yurok here, and we're all mothers. So tell me exactly how somebody's going to walk into your house and take your child. There's only one way. They're going to kill you. And that's exactly what happened. Many, many of the parents were killed in that process. So these people got to be raised as slaves after having their parent or parents murdered in front of them. All right? Now, that is an obvious problem. But the complications from that also are that you are then taken into slavery and you're not parented. You're enslaved. So you don't learn how to parent because you were never parented. Now, in addition to everything else, we were rotten slaves, and many of us, when we got old enough, we ran home. But by that time, we had passed the time when we were parented, but we came home, and that's the good thing. Then you have the boarding school era. You go, okay, you take these kids, the ones that you hadn't gathered up as slaves, and you take them and you put them in schools. And then you beat them and mistreat them and take all their culture away from them. You know, I remember hearing my mother talk with her sisters, and they were criticizing her. She was the youngest, saying, you know, you were such a baby. If you hadn't been sneaking out of your dorm and coming in with us crying all the time, we wouldn't have got in so much trouble. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Because I was raised or ran home or whatever. I was with my mom a lot. And they had never, ever spoken about boarding school. That is the only thing I ever heard any of them say, period. That's their boarding school experience. You know, but as a community at large, then you go, okay, good gravy. You know, and from that also, what's the Yurok word for police? I don't recall it right now, but I'll tell you what the translation is. The translation is men who steal children. Because they came and they took the children as slaves, and they took the children for the boarding schools. Now you wonder why they have a hard time moving in our community. You know, and you look at this is the historical trauma. Now each of those traumas have negative behaviors that grow out of those traumas. And as you look at your client base, you can identify with them which of those things happened in their families. And that's important. You know, which families were at the site of massacres, because a lot of those massacres occurred when? When are we all together? Okay, at ceremony. You know, that's going to have an impact on people. So the survivors were attacked at ceremony often. You know, so then you go, okay, now we're here today and we have these behaviors. Does that excuse the behaviors? No. But it helps you and the people who have the behaviors understand where they come from and how are you going to work with them. You know, and part of it is you're going to have to help them know what that is. Because just like with my mom and her sisters, they're not talking about it. Trust me when I tell you. You know, and nobody in this tribe has done the work of figuring out, okay, how many people were taken as slaves? And most of the slaves that were shipped south came from the north. Okay? So we had a lot of people grow up in that situation and come back with these very poor parenting skills. So you have to work with them and with your culture departments to figure out where this came from. And that's only fair. And it's the only way to really get to understand why of a behavior. Because if you don't know why on any behavior, it's really hard to stop. You know, and the whole idea of a rights-based system is somehow you can consequence people into stopping bad behavior. That's really not terrifically effective, as we can see from their penal system, which is in total, I don't know what, shambles, and their dependency system, which is not far behind, frankly. No, we have to create a different set of practices to deal with these issues. Our values can stay as they are. You know, we don't have problems with our value system. We have problems in the sense of having to develop practices. The only practices that we're aware of are their practices. And let me just say, before you started, you know, adopting practices from people who you can see are using these practices ineffectively, in the sense that they're not working for them either, that you might want to think of a different way of doing it. You know, and I trust that you all can do that. And you have to trust yourselves to start doing it differently. To realize who, like for us, culturally, aunts and uncles had a lot of say in how things ran inside the, quote, nuclear family. And if you have those standards And if you have that hands-on approach, you're going to get a much different outcome. You know, the whole thing, here's your list and I'll see you in 6 months and I'll visit you once a month. That's really not very effective. You know, so the caseloads, you can't work with that. You can't. You have to be able to have a relationship with human beings. That's the nature of human beings. Giving them a list is like giving a list to, you know, a tree. Here's your list. You know, I do not want limbs in my driveway, because if you do, you know, you're going to be on report. It's like, well, whatever. Okay, it's not going to work for you. And it's not going to work with humans either, because that's not how we work. If you say, look, we have to change this, and I'm going to help you. We're going to, you know, we're going to stay with this. And also the whole thing of, you're going to get help when we catch you at it. Wait a second. Maybe we should offer help sooner. Maybe we should say, here's the services we have. If you have these issues, let's work on these, or work on them together, or work with the tribes and say, look, if you have wellness programs, maybe when children are taken into care, we should have your wellness programs plugged in, not our stop it or else program. You know, and how are we going to do that? How are we going to recruit families? How are we going to make this a village situation instead of, okay, we're just interested in this one family and we're going to consequence them into behavior? How are you going to make this a standard that people can accept? You know, and that's what we're really looking to is, I need you to look at that and go, okay, this is what we're going to do now. We're not going to do it this way anymore. Because that way, you know, if it had worked, they had some argument in their favor. But it's not. It just isn't. You know, so look to how you're going to create different standards and different approaches. Use your value system and develop practices. And those practices, I can tell you, are going to center around things like more contact with the client, more in-person contact, more tasks together, more events that you go to together and support them to be at, and more things that are in culture that you can help them join in to do. And support. And because that's where they're going to regain their strength. Because when a person has fallen and is in danger of losing what is basically, no matter what, one of the most important things in their world, their children, they know that. And they want to figure it out. They're so far away from that, they need somebody to say, come on, let's do this together. Let's do this together. And not go, okay, well, you know, you made a mistake last Thursday and now that's it. You know, if you want a list of all the mistakes I made last Thursday, I've already forgotten them because I've made so many in between. You know, you can't operate like that. You have to go, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it together. You know, and you can call me if you need help to do this. How are we going to get this done? What's your idea of how to stop drinking or how to stop this? Do you have any ideas? What would help you do this? You know, and one of the things that was the most startling to me, there's a couple of things about the system that we're talking about, is the number of children who run away in foster care who are then trafficked by sex traffickers. And you go, dang it. You know, but it isn't just a dang it. It's how many of those kids, do we notify the tribes when their kids are missing? No, we do not. Do we help them develop protocols for looking for their children? No, we do not. You know, who does this? That is so wrong. And in addition, what is one of the most common factors among women who become victims in the murdered and missing Indian women category? You know what it is? They lost their children to foster care. Now that alone is enough to make you go, oh my God, this is not okay. You know, this is what we have driven them to. this is the help that we've provided for them. This is the same thing all over again as in slavery. We just shoot them a little later. But it's the same result. And that is not okay. And we cannot continue to be a part of that. And we have the ability to stop it. We know internally what should be because we are so close to being on that side of it. So we can tell what the practices should be. When people say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't be friends. When I first came home and I started being a judge in my home community, people were like, oh, you can't be the judge because this person. I'm like, we all grew up together. If you don't know me, it's because you're, whatever. And remember, for thousands of years, we lived in these villages and we knew each other. And were we so perfect that we had no conflict? Anybody who knows Xerox knows that's probably not true. So you have to think, okay, we had a way of resolving problems. What was it? Because we did not have these issues before. They came, and they've come very recently, and we have to put a stop to it. For the sake of the people, and the sake of the children, and the sake of all the other responsibilities that we're not meeting when we're wrecking ourselves and our families. We're not here just for ourselves and each other. We're here for this environment. We take a lot from here. We were gifted with this place and with all the things that are here. But with that gift comes the responsibility to care for it. And if we're not caring for it, then it will have a harder time protecting us in the future. But for this place, offering us a way to run and hide from these people, we would not have made it. We owe this now. And this is a debt, like the debt to our children, that we must pay. It's not a negative, it's a responsibility. We're responsible to this place, we're responsible to each other, and we have to get this done. That's part of our purpose. And I push as much as anyone else to get people to go to school, to learn these things, and to try to bring it home. But we also have to then start thinking about how are we going to evolve our practices. I get, that 200 years ago, we didn't have meth, we didn't have opioids, we didn't have all of these things that have caused all this havoc, and we do now. But their value system did not keep us from having those things, did it? Ours would have. So what we have to do is lock back into that value system and into the protections we know come from our culture and figure out what practices can lead us back down the road that we belong on. This is not our road. We got, in a wagon with somebody else, and it's not a great idea. We should have just kept walking, frankly. And this is what you have to think about. How are we going to construct our programs, and how are we going to construct our mutual support? Because that's what it is. Because there comes a day in everybody's life when they make a horrible mistake, and they need help coming back from it. Because that, unfortunately, is the nature of human beings. You sit here and you go, okay, well, human beings are this and that and whatever, but we have a great capacity to mess up. And when we do, sometimes it's pretty spectacular. And that's what happens to get us drawn into these systems. And these are not things that we would appreciate or say are okay. So we have to help each other past that and help each other come back into community to be able to hold ourselves upright and to be able to make right things that we've done wrong and offer an opportunity to do that. And that's what program development should be about. And for our children to be taken away and taken somewhere else, they often have that feeling inside themselves of longing and lack of definition of who they are. And that's the thing when they took the language. English is an interesting language because it's a very noun-based language, and all of our languages are not noun-based. We're action-based, we're feeling-based. We have words for how a plant feels when it's growing. They have nothing like that. So many of our feelings have no words. And if you take the children not just away from the language, but away from all the rest of it too, that longing still is in there. That inability to talk to oneself is still in there. And that's what you need to address. What are we going to do about that? And how are we going to try to bring culture back into our communities? Here we allow like 1 hour a week of language class as part of employment. And we have a language class in the court, and all employees can attend. I have to say I'm an awful student, but I try. I've always been a bad student, so that's not a new thing. But it's interesting because it is so different. We're talking about even the number system. There's 20 different number systems at least for how you count different things. And some overlap. And what overlaps with how you count humans? How you count salmon in Yurok. All right? That's terrifically meaningful. And that's the kind of information you need to know. And that can help people heal inside, because it's a way of trying to communicate with yourself. Because so often you feel locked in, and that's what's happening with your clients who have these injuries and then don't have the words. And also, if people haven't talked to them, they just think they're like a bad seed or something. Why? Why did I do this? And one thing I realized as a judge is to stop asking somebody why they did it, because they would look at me as if I was going to tell them why they did it, because they don't know why they did it. And it's really hard to move forward if you have no idea why you did it, because you don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow and do it again, because who knows? Where did it come from? Why did it descend on me? Am I just a bad person? No, it came from somewhere. And that's part of what we have to help them with. So today I've given you a lot of, this is basically just my idea, and you need to understand that too. You can go, wait a second, that crazy old woman, and walk away from it. But I want you to think about it a little bit. And I appreciate it if you do. And I appreciate that you've made the effort to join with us about the Indian Child Welfare Act and to try to keep our children at home. And I would say the best thing that we can do is build up our tribal infrastructures to bring our children home and to let them stay home and to have their parents home and parent the best they can. We can do this. We did it for thousands of years and lived happily and well on this river. And that's what we need to return to. So I appreciate your listening, and I wish you all well. Thank you.